Hello and welcome to our Essential Concepts lecture. What we'll be covering today is bet sizing by pot size, effective stack sizes, and stack to pot ratios, commonly referred to SPRs in the poker world. Now, these are common overarching concepts that apply to poker in general, but I wanted to talk about them in this course before we got into the nitty-gritty of poker mathematics, because I'll be talking about lots of concepts that apply to these different topics. So let's go ahead and get started, and we're going to kick off this lecture talking about bet sizing by pot size. So this is a fairly simple concept, and what it states is that when you are discussing poker hands with other poker players, whether it be on a forum, a Skype study group, in a course, or with a poker coach, you want to be talking about the hand in terms of a percentage of a pot size bet. And I have these listed out here, anywhere from a quarter pot size bet up to a pot size bet. We don't want to be talking about bet sizing in dollar amounts because it's confusing. We want to talk about it in pot sizes because it's universal. So a half pot size bet means the same thing at 5NL and 10NL when we're doing analysis and we're looking at the mathematics of it, versus somebody is saying I made a $34 bet on the flop. That's more confusing. So this is just a general concept, and the point that you need to take away from this is that when you're discussing poker hands with other players, talk about it in terms of the percentage of the pot size. You know, I made a 2/3 pot size bet on the turn, and villain jammed all in for another pot size bet. That makes a lot more sense than I bet $34 on the turn and villain jammed all in for $78. So that can be more confusing, especially if the person that you're talking to doesn't know the blinds and the stakes and the effective stacks and other information. So just remember to discuss poker hands in regards to the pot size. Now let's talk about the concept of effective stack sizes. So what is the effective stack size? The effective stack size is the size of the smallest stack between two different poker players in a hand. And it's the amount of money that you can win in a poker hand against a particular opponent. So for example, assume that you're playing heads up, you have $5, your opponent has $2. The effective stack size is going to be $2 because that's the smallest amount of your two. You have 5, he has 2, and $2 is the most that you can win. So the most that he can win from you is $2, the most that you can win from him is $2. And it's important because it plays a role in implied odds, fold equity, and SPRs. So let's do a quick example, and I have an example on the slide. We have an example where small blind has $5, big blind has $10, and you have $15. So let's just look at the effective stack size of a hand where small blind is in the hand versus big blind. What's the effective stack size? We need to look at the two and determine the smallest. The smallest is $5, so the effective stack size is going to be $5. Why is that? The most that big blind can win from the small blind is $5, and conversely, the most that the small blind can win from the big blind is $5. Now let's take a look at a hand where you're playing against the big blind. So big blind has $10, you have $15. Effective stack size, this is going to be the smaller of the two, so the effective stack size is $10. Again, the most big blind can win from you is $10, and the most that you can win from the big blind is this whole stack, which is $10. So that's effective stack size. It's a fairly simple concept, and it is really important when we talk about certain mathematical concepts. So you really want to be aware of your opponent's stack sizes and yours, and understand the concept of effective stack sizes. Now let's talk about stack to pot ratios. So what is an SPR? Well, it's the effective stack sizes divided by the size of the pot. So SPR is effective stack size over pot size, and it's considered a risk to reward ratio. You risk your effective stack size to win the size of the pot. Let's do a quick example. So effective stack size is $50, the pot size is 10. SPR would be 50 divided by 10, which is equal 5. Let's talk about why SPR is important. People play differently based upon their effective stack sizes. Now, a person that's a short stacker with a lower SPR will be more likely to commit to a pot with a more marginal hand, versus somebody that's a deep stacker with a much higher SPR. They will be much less likely to commit to a pot with a marginal hand, and that'll make more sense when we talk about it on this slide. So I went ahead and put a quick table together, and we have different SPRs in place. We have low SPRs, anywhere up to 5, we have medium SPRs 6 to 15, and we have high SPRs of 16 plus. So what you'll notice with this hand, if we look at the different SPRs and we have our low SPRs and mediums and highs, look at the different type of hands that people will commit with when we're in these type of hands. So somebody that has a low SPR is more likely to commit with a hand such as a single over pair, a top pair, or bottom two pair type of a hand. Somebody with a medium SPR from 6 to 15, they're going to be only committing with stronger hands such as top two pair, sets, non-nutted flushes such as like a queen high flush or a 10 high flush, and straights that are non-nutted. So maybe the second or third best straight, or maybe the fourth best straight. Now if you have a really high SPR, if you're very deep stacked, then you're only going to see people committing all their chips to the stack, to the pot, in that hand with nutted hands. So they want to have the best hand, or they want to have a set. So what you're going to notice here, and what you should realize when you're in a hand, is you need to look at effective stack sizes. And if your opponent is committing to a hand, take a look at the SPRs, calculate the SPRs, and that'll give you an idea of the type of a hand strength that they're committing to the pot with. So if you think about it, somebody that has a low SPR where they don't have that many chips behind, and they've already committed a certain percentage, a fairly large percentage of their chips to the pot, they're willing to commit with a much weaker hand, versus somebody that's playing really deep stacked where they've only committed a very small percentage of their chips to the pot. They're not going to commit all in with nothing but the best of the best hands. So this will give you an idea of the hand strength of your opponents when they are committing to a hand, and to give you an idea of also what type of hands you should be committing to in a pot based upon your SPRs. So that'll go ahead and conclude this lecture. We talked about bet sizing by pot sizes, we talked about effective stacks, and lastly we talked about stack to pot ratios. If you have any questions about any of these topics that we talked about in this lecture, as always, reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Thanks for watching this lecture, and we'll go ahead and we'll see you at the next lecture.